Why did the Chernobyl nuclear reactor explode, when in theory, reactor safety protocols should make such a disaster impossible? How does a single planned test, designed to improve safety, partially destroy an entire facility and contaminate half a continent? To this day, most associate Chernobyl with haunting images of devastation. But behind these symbols lies a complex intellectual puzzle. How could a supposedly modern reactor, run by qualified professionals, not only fail, but do so in such a catastrophic and counterintuitive way? This video is an attempt to fully understand this central puzzle, digging into all the available details. By methodically dissecting every stage, from engineering design to human behavior and institutional secrecy, we'll uncover how a routine procedure became a cascade of failures. Let's imagine we are observers in the control room of Reactor 4 in Pripyat, on that fateful April night in 1986, as a safety check quickly unravels into one of the most consequential disasters in history. To grasp how human variables fed into the disaster, let's analyze the mindset and decision-making environment of the engineers and supervisors on the night of April 25th. Scheduling for the safety test required coordination with remote grid managers, leading to delays and forcing operators to keep the reactor at low, unstable power. Chief Engineer Anatoly Dyatlov exemplified the Soviet emphasis on authority, reportedly insisting, "Do what you are told," when safety concerns were raised. Operators, many highly competent but inexperienced with low-power RBMK operation, were caught between following ambiguous instructions and their training. The prevailing culture penalized deviation from directives, placing conformity and rapid completion of tasks above critical questioning. A cognitive and organizational setup that systematically amplified individual missteps into cascading problems. To reconstruct the Chernobyl disaster, we must first understand its stage. In 1986, the Soviet Union's extensive civilian nuclear program was both a symbol of national might and a testing ground for advanced technology. The Chernobyl nuclear power plant, located north of Kyiv, operated with 4 RBMK 1000 reactors. Unique, graphite-moderated designs optimized for rapid construction and dual military-civilian use. These reactors were technically advanced in some ways, but incorporated unorthodox features, like a positive void coefficient and graphite-tip control rods, rarely found in Western technology. Surrounding the plant was the city of Pripyat, a model of Soviet modernity with a young, highly skilled workforce. Yet, this high-tech environment was governed by a culture of rigid hierarchy and a doctrine that discouraged questioning orders, especially in matters involving state prestige. Let's embark on a detailed, step-by-step investigation to unravel the interconnected mechanisms of the Chernobyl disaster. 1. The test's purpose and the low-power constraint. The test aimed to determine if steam turbines, spinning down after a power loss, could power cooling pumps during the ~60s required for backup generators to activate. This required running the reactor at about 700 MW thermal, an unstable operating point for the RBMK 1000, unknown in detail to most staff. 2. External grid demands and delay. Unexpectedly, regional grid authorities requested the plant remain at high power to meet electricity needs, delaying the test for nearly 10 hours. During this interval, operators were forced to maintain the reactor at low power, contrary to standard operating procedures, creating the first in a sequence of deviation from safe norms. 3. Xenon poisoning, a hidden instability. At low power, the core accumulated xenon-135, a fission byproduct with an extremely high neutron absorption cross-section. This xenon poisoning suppressed the chain reaction, creating a feedback loop. Less power produced, more xenon accumulated, further lowering reactivity. Operators attempted to counteract this by extracting more and more control rods, normally kept inserted as a principal safety mechanism. 4. Bypassing operational safety limits. Standard rules required no fewer than 26 to 30 rods remain in the core. However, by the time power leveled off at a dangerously low 200 MW, only as few as 6 to 8 rods were inserted. and many manual and automatic safety systems had been disabled to allow the test to proceed undisturbed. This risky configuration was neither simulated in practice nor anticipated in safety documentation. Point 5. The RBMK reactor's positive void coefficient. Unlike Western light water reactors, which slow down as bubbles voids form, the RBMK had a positive void coefficient. As coolant water turned to steam, portions of the core actually became more reactive, not less. This counterintuitive property, combined with a graphite moderator, meant that any loss of coolant could accelerate the chain reaction. Point 6, disabling the emergency core cooling system. In anticipation that the cooling system might interfere with test data, Dyatlov ordered the emergency cooling circuits disabled. This pivotal act, intended to keep the test clean, eliminated rapid intervention capacity in case of abnormal heat or pressure spikes. Point 7. Initiating the test. Shortly after 1:00 a.m., operators began the test. With turbine power being cut, pumps became dependent on rotational momentum, and water flow decreased, further raising the risk of overheating and steam void formation within the core. Point 8. Unexpected core dynamics and loss of control. As flow dropped, a feedback loop formed. Falling water flow increased temperatures, producing steam. Steam, in turn, increased reactivity due to the positive void coefficient, boosting power output. Yet the plant's instrumentation was neither fast nor precise enough to reflect these changes in real time to the operators. Point 9. Manual overrides and the last line of defense. Operators now confronted erratic power readings. With Dyatlov pressing for test completion, interventions relied on flawed or incomplete understandings. Operators trusted the system's inertia and the belief that shutdown commands would always be protective. Point 10. The fatal role of graphite-tip control rods. When the emergency AZ5 button was pressed, initiating rapid shutdown, all rods began to insert. However, the graphite tips of these rods, as they first entered the core, temporarily displaced neutron-absorbing coolant and provided a burst of extra reactivity, a design flaw not found in Western reactors. This effect, lasting only seconds, was fatal under the conditions present in Reactor 4.11. Rapid power surge and core disintegration. The surge in core reactivity raised energy output exponentially. Within 4 seconds, the estimated core power climbed to over 30,000 MW, far beyond design limits. Fuel elements ruptured. Water in the channels flashed to steam, causing the first explosion, blew the heavy reactor lid, weighing more than 2,000 tons, off the top of the core. Seconds later, a graphite fire began, the second explosion following as the core was exposed to air. Point 12. Immediate confusion, radiation release, and uninformed response. Operators and first responders initially had no comprehension of the true scale. Many believed a routine hydrogen or coolant explosion had occurred. The lack of appropriate radiological training and measurement equipment resulted in critical underestimation. Firefighters, many without protective gear, entered the highly radioactive debris, receiving fatal doses within minutes, as later dosimeter records and survivor accounts attest. Point 13. Secrecy and delayed evacuation. At the institutional level, the Soviet drive for secrecy took over. Officials delayed both external notification and local evacuation. Pripyat residents remained in place for 36 hours, absorbing massive radioactive contamination. Internal memos, since declassified, confirm higher-ups sought to minimize news of the accident or the scope of release. Point 14. International alarm and hostile data environments. The first alarm came not from Chernobyl, but from Forsmark nuclear plant in Sweden, whose employees detected unexpected radioactive particles on their clothing, traced origins by atmospheric modeling, and forced the Soviet government to confess to the international community. Point 15. Mitigation, disinformation, and liquidators. Mitigation began with helicopter crews dropping sand, boron, and lead onto the core, aiming to smother the graphite fire. But guided by incomplete or false information, some drops actually broke fuel assemblies further. Simultaneously, contradictory reports misled both local and international communities about real radiation levels. Over 600,000 liquidators, soldiers, firemen, civilian volunteers, were ultimately conscripted to contain, spread, and construct a sarcophagus under grueling, often lethal, conditions. 16. Long-term recognition and systemic failure. Only after extensive international investigation, metallurgical analysis of core samples, and sequestered interviews with plant operators did the full technical chain become clear. Every layer, reactor design, human procedure, oversight, and communications, played a necessary part in the disaster. The RBMK's design defects were not admitted publicly for years, and several managers were scapegoated without correcting root issues. Each element in this sequence, institutional inertia, flawed design, procedural deviation, cognitive biases, delayed information flow, illuminates how disasters in complex systems rarely stem from a single error, but from tightly coupled, overlapping failures. Why did each link break? Let's synthesize these insights in the next section. In synthesizing the Chernobyl disaster, we find a rare convergence of flaws, technical, procedural, and cultural, which together made the accident nearly inevitable once the test began. Central to unfolding catastrophe was the RBMK reactor's positive void coefficient, a quirk that allowed rising steam in the coolant channels, under low-flow conditions, to sharply increase reactivity, unlike Western reactor designs where steam voids are a stabilizing factor. This property was not fully understood at the operator level, nor was it prominently documented. Next, the graphite-tip control rods, implemented as a cost-saving measure, rendered the final safety maneuver, the AZ-5 shutdown button, a trigger for runaway reactivity under precisely the wrong conditions. From a human and organizational standpoint, a culture of rigid hierarchy and obscured information ensured that operators prioritized test procedure and deference to authority over improvisational safety thinking. Many safety systems were deliberately bypassed, not out of malice but a belief that the test's importance and official backing superseded normal caution. When the chain of events began, unstable low power, xenon poisoning, extraction of control rods, loss of cooling, and attempted emergency shutdown, the system's weaknesses compounded, leaving no margin to recover. Immediate and long-term responses were paralyzed by secrecy, as officials sought to control the narrative rather than maximize safety or rapid containment. The available evidence, control room logs, operator testimonies, and post-accident scientific modeling, shows unequivocally that no single mistake was sufficient to produce the disaster. Rather, the configuration of Chernobyl's technology, working culture, and communication practices created a set of conditions where, once the test sequence began outside of safe operational envelope, a catastrophic loss of control was, at that moment, all but assured. Some gaps remain, such as precise second-by-second personnel actions in the control room, but the broad causal mechanics are robustly attested by multidisciplinary investigation. What does the Chernobyl catastrophe reveal about more than just nuclear reactors? Fundamentally, it demonstrates that in complex, high-consequence systems, resilience depends on both technical safeguards and an open, responsive culture of inquiry. The disaster's chain of failures was enabled not merely by bad equipment or mistaken presses of a button, but by barriers to information flow, stifling hierarchy, and an unwillingness to learn from warnings or admit systemic flaws. As we deploy ever more powerful technologies, Chernobyl stands as a caution. True safety demands transparency, institutional humility, and constant vigilance, reminding us that disaster emerges not only from isolated errors, but from the gaps between people, process, and understanding. This in-depth analysis has dissected the Chernobyl disaster based on extensive details. What other facts or perspectives do you believe are crucial? Share your well-informed thoughts in the comments, like if this deep dive provided new insights, and subscribe for more comprehensive investigations on dreadful dossiers.